testing. We are 21 online. I think there's about 7 tech team members. So we're not so badly off, but let's give it 2 minutes.
Let's give it a few more minutes. Thank you, speakers, for being patient as we're testing. Karen, just give me a cue when you want me to start. I've still got a few people coming in.
We're all set here, Claudia. We have 23 people online. So if you want maybe another 3 people to walk into your room, then you can give it half a minute and then we're good to go.
Okay, I'm going to wait just one more minute then.
Okay. Just so you know, Claudia, we're so jealous that you guys in the room are in the room. Looks really nice. Yeah.
Right, I'm thinking about kicking it off because I know that we've got people online and they've been patiently waiting. Come in, fellow colleagues. We have a few more people. Yeah, shall we get started? Do encourage people to come in though if they come late, that's fine. Okay. All right, are we good to go online, Karen?
Yeah, all good to go.
Right, welcome everyone. Thank you. We've got a great session, which might be a bit of a technological adventure for you today, so thank you. But on inclusive data, partnerships, and decision making, in particular, we're going to have a really active discussion on what works, and we really want to hear from you. So be prepared. We're not going to let you out of the room, those of you who are in the room, those of you who are in the online room, to have some good discussions. So the background to this session is all about institutions should operate with data that's inclusive and reflective of the communities that they serve to avoid perpetuating socioeconomic inequalities, discrimination, and mistrust, particularly among marginalized populations. For data to be truly inclusive, though, it must accurately describe all people's realities and be produced and used with their knowledge, consent, and participation. This requires engagement, dialogue, and partnerships between governments, organizations, and communities. And over the last several years, interest, momentum, and action on inclusive data partnerships has increased dramatically, driven in no small part by the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and their initiative on the Inclusive Data Charter. There's now broad recognition that those most affected by how data is produced and used should have a say in decision making, with many actors exploring innovative approaches to achieving this. However, there remain challenges while ensuring that inclusive data partnerships don't replicate power imbalances and inequalities the very inequalities that they aim to tackle. While institutions increasingly invest in their data systems, they often miss a critical opportunity on how to close existing data gaps that inadvertently facilitate discrimination and bias. We are at a critical point where learnings, insight, and successful emerging practices need to be consolidated and shared to inform future engagement. And that's why we're all here today. So I'm Claudia Wells. I'm the director, the International Hub Director at Development Initiatives. We're one of the founding members of the Inclusive Data Charter. We've got a fantastic set of speakers online. The GPSDD and the colleagues who run the Inclusive Data Charter, as well as IREX. And we're bringing together a diverse set of practitioners in the data for development community to discuss their innovative approaches to inclusive data. We're going to start with a series of really short online speakers, impact stories from our panelists, highlighting a range of inclusive data partnerships which have informed policies and programs and improved people's lives. We're then going to split into breakout groups. This is the exciting bit, so bear with us. Hopefully it will all work, but it will be good fun because we're actually going to get to talk to each other. And we're going to convene you together, and we're going to use some online polls to generate reflections and insights. So if you're logged on to any of the technical platforms, do be looking in the chat. You can use some of the online polls there, and my technical colleagues online will be monitoring those and looking at the results, and I can report those back for them. And then by the end of the session, we aim to surface and share new insights and learnings, which can shape the future of the Inclusive Data Charter's work and guide existing and new partnerships. So without further ado, I'm going to go to my first speaker. So lovely technical colleagues, if you could please share the screen for Mardina Yahaya. She's a digital sociologist, researcher, and community movement builder whose work investigates and addresses the implications of technology-based surveillance and harm within data-field societies and states on minoritized genders and communities. Mardia is a data and digital rights researcher at Policy and the Africa community lead at the Team Community. If we could get her on the screen, unmute her mic, Karen, and see if we can get her picture up here. And we're going to invite her to give a quick lightning talk for us. Mardia, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Wonderful. Here she is. Right, I'm going to come and sit down with you in the audience. Radical. Fire away. We're excited to hear from you on this critical issue.
Okay, thank you. I am Mardia, and so today I'll mostly be framing inclusive data practices in the form of questions to help us think about the existing tensions that exist with the data practices and models. But for the first thing I'd say is that inclusive data practices definitely need to be contextual, right? Um, but if we're looking into some tensions of these practices or tensions between privacy and representation, for example, when ensuring that some level of privacy exists for sensitive identifiers such as gender or ethnicity, we often say that such data should not be included when we're collecting. But then at the point of annotation and analyzing the data, how do we really know whether the data being gathered is inclusive enough and able to create help us create fairer and unbiased systems. But while we're thinking of such issues with privacy and representation, when these personal information is also collected to ensure some form of inclusivity, um, how do we also ensure that the data is protected, the data subjects are protected, and from risks of potential surveillance and targeting? These are some of the tensions when we think around privacy and representation. Some other thing is thinking around who collects the data and how do their social position facilitates biases. So sometimes in a research that was conducted, I think last year, you realize that some of the women who were farmers said the people who were hired to collect the data were men. And when the women said, well, we will not grow corn, the men ignored their input and took the input of other men and said, well, this community said they would grow corn. So sometimes the social positionality also tends to affect the type of data collected and how inclusive it is. Um, Also, when we are considering things like data protection, and that goes back to the security, safety, privacy, and representation aspect, we also must ask ourselves, where does individual autonomy end and communal data begin? Because the way we look at data today looks at it from an individual autonomy perspective. But a lot of times when you look at, for example, my name, I'm called Mardia Sibayahia. If you collect data on my name, Mardia alone is me, but Sibayahia also relates to other people, such as probably who is my family, who is all of, and when you look at a lot of ethnic communities or ethnicities, their names are in a way that also speaks to their lineages. So when you look at data in that way, you realize that even when analyzing data, we don't analyze data from um, an individual perspective. We mostly analyze it in relation to the people who are categorized as similar to you. So then thinking around what would communal data practices and data protection also entail if I give up a certain type of data, are people whose data is affiliated to me, are they also consenting to that? And I think those are some of the tensions with the idea of consent and the idea of autonomy. um, those are some of the issues and that arises. Well, as much as these are difficult questions, it also helps us assess power dynamics when it comes to data practices, collection, tabulating, and analyzing. And also, as we center these frameworks in designing, it's very important to center some of these frameworks to design and govern an increasingly datafied society. But at the core of all of these, as we are creating or collecting, our data practices or data driven innovation need to be participatory and make sure that and not make sure that the people who exist at every value chain are invisibilized, because that's another problem with data collection, where the people at various value chains and decision chains become invisible, and so their input is either eroded or not seen, and it just creates the broader issue. But yeah, that is all I have for you today.
Oh, that's all you have. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, and such really important points about how we collect data can kind of just embed those invisible biases. I'm going to move straight on to our next lightning talk. Philip Davidovic from IREX and Development Gateway. If we can get you unmuted and your slides shown. I believe you've got some slides to show. That would be great. And get you up on the camera to hear a little bit more about you. Philip, I don't have a bio for you, but so maybe you can do a little short introduction for me as well, because I didn't have that in my pack. Apologies.
No, no worries. Thanks so much, Claudia. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining the session. My name is Philip Davidovich. I'm a technical advisor at IREX, working on data and digital literacy initiatives. I'm here partnered with our partner organization, Development Gateway, to highlight a couple of programs that we wanted to illustrate specifically on centering citizen-generated data for inclusive development. A lot of the work we do is obviously in East Africa in these cases, but one of our larger offices also in Ukraine. So I wanted to highlight a couple projects with that. Yeah, if it's time to put the slides up as more of an illustrative example of some of the stuff we're doing, I would love to have that. But let me know if it's ready to go.
Can we share the slides, technical team? They're just coming up for you, hopefully.
I'm just checking. Would the tech team want me to share Phil's slides, or can they do that from that? I mean,
We're just checking. Would you like Karen to share the slides, team? Yes, please, Karen. Thank you. Okay, so Karen, if you just need to reject the current screen sharing invitation, and you should be able to share from your machine.
just give me a moment.
Guys in the room, I want you to keep all of that wonderful information from the last lightning talk in your heads about power imbalances within the collection of the statistical information and the data collection process, because we're going to be coming to you in the breakout sessions to get your views on some of these issues. They coming?
Yeah. Okay. Let me just.
Okay. Great. I think they should be coming soon. Wonderful. We can see the slides. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. So yeah, I wanted to kind of share a couple examples about IREX and Development Gateway's experience working on centering community-driven data for inclusive development. And the examples we're going to share really focus on enhancing service delivery with inclusive data and how that can be a really iterative process with feedback loops and developing the mechanisms for those to be meaningful feedback loops. So the first example I wanted to share is just in the next slide. This is with McKenna County, the small county leading action in open procurement in Kenya. Back in 2019, Development Gateway, our partner, collaborated with the county of McKinney to develop essentially a open procurement platform as part of the overall the large government's commitment to increase transparency and accessibility in the system over the years. 1 year later, we did see a massive thing. One of the main components of this initiative that Development Gateway incorporated were bringing all the actors involved in the procurement process into the development phases as they were designing the tool itself. This included government, civil society, and private sector initiatives, but also citizen engagement during the entire testing and piloting of the process. A year later, the initial numbers suggested that the procurement reforms improved competition, efficiency, and transparency, with indicators of accessibility. Procurement processes published nearly tripled from 160 to 461 year to year. More affordable. In 2020 calendar year, they saw a savings of over 45 million shillings in the county alone, an increase in number of bidders, which in turn produced a more diverse group of suppliers in the procurement process for the county. The main takeaway that this experience really highlighted, it validated kind of taking a bird's eye view in the approach of something as usually consistent as procurement in the overall mechanisms of building trust within the society and how you can engage citizen feedback in incorporating improvements in those processes. The next example I'd like to share on the next slide is with our program in Ukraine that was developed immediately after the war started back in 2022. This is called Spivdia, which matches humanitarian aid and support services to the citizens in Ukraine during the war. This is a nationwide platform based on support centers and networks in almost every region of Ukraine that connect volunteer, state, and business initiatives in the humanitarian aid sector with citizens of Ukraine based on their needs. This includes regional hubs that provide social and emotional support for children, shelter for displaced people, legal aid, individual consultations for psychiatry, and then educational and informational events. This entire platform was developed and leveraged based on the many years IREX has been working in Ukraine and the partnerships that we were able to nurture over those years of time. But what was designed as a wider partnership and based on feedback loops with the citizens on the needs that they're doing. Uh, oh, a proper, essentially, kind of incorporation of how inclusive data at the citizen and local level can really inform how services can meet the direct needs of the population. Some of the main milestones that this project has really seen: over 500,000 people have been provided with food and hygiene kits since the war broke out. Almost 3,000 career counseling sessions have been facilitated. 10,000 citizens have received psychological and law assistance, and 62,000 children have been provided emotional and psychological support. Both of these examples we wanted to share highlight the three kind of components that we find are really valuable in making the development and incorporating an iterative process in inclusive data and citizen generated data around the people, partnerships, and processes. As Claudia and previous panelists mentioned, the power dynamics in each of these are essential in how you can navigate it, but it is one step at a time. Incorporating the people in every stage of the process, identifying caps, and ensuring there's mechanisms to incorporate feedback to improve, identify improvements, partnerships, and leveraging the diverse experiences and expertise of every stakeholder in the environment and the enabling conditions of that environment. And then, of course, the processes and ensuring that each of the improvements that you make are complementing what already exists, but also deconstructing the barriers that might be in the way of improving those systems. So those are kind of the lessons learned that we had from this, and then kind of the main principles that we wanted to share from those two stories, essentially. So thanks so much for sharing, and I'll pass it back over to Claudia.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's always really inspiring to see data and processes having such a direct impact on human lives. Thank you so very much. And I love people, power, and processes. I love an acronym that comes in threes. It sticks in my head. So without further ado, we're going to move swiftly on to Emily Stidson from the UK's Office for National Statistics. Emily, I wonder if you could, as you come on to unmute and put yourself on camera, whether you could give yourself a little bit of an introduction and tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing on inclusive data, because I know you're great forerunners for this at the UK Office for National Statistics. A pleasure to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Hi there. Yeah, no problem. So hi everyone, my name is Emily and I'm the Deputy Head of Outreach and Engagement at the Office for National Statistics. We are the kind of UK's largest independent producer of official statistics and the recognised National Statistical Institute of the UK, which means we're responsible for publishing and collecting statistics related to various aspects of life across particularly England and Wales, and we work closely with our counterparts in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. But for the purposes of today, wanted to talk to you specifically about the work that we do in our team. So my team sits alongside a group called the External Affairs team, and together we make up something called the Engagement Hub. And this lives inside our communications division at the Office for National Statistics. And we work together with many, many stakeholders across our data and our data collection and across the wider public. And today I'm just going to take you through really quickly how we believe the work that we're doing around engagement and the partnerships we make with our stakeholders will lead to our data being more inclusive and to meet our ambitions around inclusivity and reducing underrepresentativeness. And just to underpin that, our authority, which is like the larger body that all of our statistical work takes part underneath, has a strategy called the Statistics for Public Good, and which is to build high quality data analysis to inform the UK, improve lives and build the future. And that is made up of 4 pillars, one of which is specifically a pillar of inclusivity. So it does underpin all of the work that we do across ONS. which is the acronym, by the way, for the organisation. So you'll, if you work with us at all, you'll notice that we create lots of acronyms for everything that we do. But particularly, we want to be inclusive in our data and teams. We also have, over the last couple of years, led by our national statistician, Sir Ian Diamond, convened together something called the Inclusive Data Task Force, which was an external committee brought together to look at how data could be made more inclusive. And they produced 8 data principles, recommendations that we in the office are trying to meet and work towards going forward with the aim of improving data inclusivity. And in particular, one of those recommendations is related to the work that we do in my area in our wider team, and that was from the recommendation around involving the public and continuing to build relationships and trust, and specifically to build, and I quote from the recommendations, on the 2021 census community outreach to improve our communications with underrepresented groups. My team specifically were working on that piece of work during the recent census. We took that census during 2021, so it was in the peak of the pandemic, but we developed a way of working with our underrepresented groups, people who were less likely to be able to or motivated to take part in our census. And we developed relationships and strong trusted bonds with key intermediaries and representatives of groups in years leading up to the actual census. So I kind of started this work 3 or 4 years before the census took place on the 21st of March 2021. And then we had a peak of that engagement. We employed 300 field staff during the peak of that operation who worked out in the field, obviously in a COVID limited way, but out in the field all across England and Wales to connect on a hyper-local level with the communities that we'd been working with for many years in advance of this piece of work. And we think it's incredibly important, and it's evidenced in the way that we managed to achieve some really interesting activity and enabled and supported and gave autonomy to groups who would otherwise not necessarily have encountered the messaging around taking part in the census. For example, there was a community of the Ravadasia people, so South Asian faith, who made their own music video talking about doing the census, and there was a song that the community produced together and they shared around amongst the community, and they made themselves a video and they were wearing the census colour of purple and encouraging everybody to take part. And this, we found, was the most important thing that came to working inclusively and developing partnerships, is that, you know, working and reaching out through intermediaries, through people who communities trust and that you can have a trusted relationship with, so that your messages can be endorsed by them and be shared out to the community by a voice that the community trusts, which will lead to, you know, a greater kind of space to listen to what you're trying to kind of bring to the table, and an opportunity to kind of open doors to have conversations and help people take part and help people get involved. And it also increased our learning as an organisation, a much better understanding of groups, what was important to them, the practical and motivational barriers to potentially taking part in something like a census survey or any other surveys in reality. And we were able to better understand that and feed that into the development process, so that people were better able to get involved when the time came, and we had the mechanisms then in place to better raise awareness and reach more people. And we ended up with all sorts of things, not only press coverage, but the community-driven activity, creating websites, creating their own posters. We did activities, we did kind of awareness-raising events. We worked with our local government colleagues as well. We had relationships with all of our local authorities and councils, which operate across England and Wales, and they did things like fund advertising campaigns on the side of our waste disposal lorries and things like that, so that all avenues to reach all different types of people in society were really taken up, and that was generated from that partnership relationship that we developed with them. And what that has led to is that looking at the success of that activity, and how well engaged our stakeholders were, we've continued to keep those relationships alive. So after the end of the census, we've looked at the learnings that we took from that and created the engagement hub. So it didn't exist before Census 2021. So what we now do is take that work forward in my team. So working with all of those different stakeholders, continuing to develop those relationships and reaching out further into communities, but using them across ONS projects, across all the different things happening in the office, to take the benefits that we've generated from linking up and partnering with key intermediaries and representatives of underrepresented groups, so that they can be realised across other projects, and ultimately then the life cycle of data, somebody taking part, somebody seeing that the results come out, recognising themselves in data, using the data, seeing a benefit, will increase that continued approach. That's the aim of things, is to bring the life cycle round, and over time gradually increase and increase and increase our underrepresented groups in it, until hopefully they are no longer underrepresented. So that's there's lots of people to follow me. I could talk on this topic for a long time, so I'll pause there, and thank you for listening. I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's wonderful to hear your passion for such a great topic for inclusion, and I think we're all behind you on that. What a fantastic idea, a statistical engagement hub. I love that, and the examples of really getting out there in the community with the long-term goal that these groups will no longer be underrepresented. So I really love that long-term ambitious goal there. We've got our last lightning speaker now, who's Moses Cheek. So if we could get Moses on camera, unmuted. Well, I just introduced him. He's a development specialist with more than 20 years experience in the sector. He's got a wealth of experience on disability inclusion, economic empowerment, program design, project implementation, stakeholder management, and partnership development. And Moses is currently the country director of Site Savers in Kenya. Moses, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Emily. And I'm going to take you through the journey that we walked here in Kenya towards inclusive disability data. So one of the monumental things that happened in 2018 is when the government of Kenya and the UK government co-hosted the first Global Disability Summit. And out of that particular summit, the Kenyan government signed the Inclusive Data Charter in 2018. But then despite signing the Inclusive Data Charter, there was no action plan which was being developed, though Kenya, a year after, when we are conducting the national census, we had actually piloted the use of the Washington Group short set of questions in 2019. So there was a continued disappointment by stakeholders on the state of disability data in the country, and they need to do something about it, especially on coordination across stakeholders, including the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. So this momentum around IDC and the GDS provided a fertile ground for action to be undertaken. So what is it that we did? One of the things that we did is that we brought partners together to support the State Department of Labor and Social Protection. That's where disability in Kenya is housed, IDC focal point, and also bringing in OPDs, and to ensure that we finalize and launch the IDC action plan. So the partners that were part of this were Site Savers Development Initiatives, the FCDO, the KNBS, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the GPSD, among others, with the OPDs playing a very critical role in this. And what this did is that it enabled a coordinated conversation on disability data, both official and for non-official statistics. And when the IDC partnership was set up in 2020, Kenya had already, again, like I stated, piloted the use of the Washington Group of short questions. And this gave us a very good platform to be able to lobby with government officials for them to appreciate the need of this particular IDC action plan. So I think what we've achieved, and here I'm going to highlight three things in terms of what the partnership has achieved. So the collaboration on the action plan has encouraged government to take more concrete action on disability inclusive data. It also spurred the government of Kenya through the State Department of Labor and Social Protection to develop and finalize and launch an IDC action plan and follow through on their GDS commitments to strengthen disability inclusive data. And I can say that Kenya has been one of the IDC fostered more collaboration and knowledge exchange by bringing different perspectives and experiences from both state and non-state actors, and enabled more dialogue around the IDC principles, the disability data issues in Kenya, and barriers that need to be addressed to ensure full inclusion and participation of people with disabilities in the society. And again, like I stated, we've ensured that OPDs, among others, UDPK, which is the United Disabled People of Kenya, and the National Council for Persons with Disabilities are the lead. The other thing that we've done is to influence changes to the on the governance of the Interagency Coordination Committee. So in Kenya, we do have what you call the Disability Interagency Coordination Committee, which brings together government and non-state actors and organizations of persons with disability, and to ensure that they have a new disability data subcommittee, which again comprises of state and non-state actors to ensure the issue of disability data inclusion. Then some of the three key learnings that we pick from this, the first one is the need for us to ensure that there's a monitoring framework for the rollout and implementation of the inclusive data action plan. The second one is that the inclusive data charter has potential to build a political will for inclusive data and creates a transparent and accountable way for governments and organizations to commit to strengthen data systems and ensure that no one is left behind. And in Kenya, we have a new registration system for persons with disability, which is also emanating as part of this broader inclusive data campaign. The last one is the importance of disability data in key areas like gender and financial access. We are starting to see more organizations and more county governments delving into this particular issue. So that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moses. I must say, on behalf of my organisation at Development Initiatives, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you on that inclusive data action plan. What you've achieved there in Kenya in partnership with organisations representing persons with disabilities and with the Bureau of Statistics has been truly great. Right, now we're into the fun part of the session. So I want you all, especially those of you in the room, to bear with me because we're going to break into two breakout groups. We're going to have one here in the room in Hangzhou, and then we're going to have one online. And we're going to have a bit of a discussion, and we want to hear from you as participants. And we want you to talk to each other as well. Shocker. We want to hear your own experiences and listen to others. And in particular, we want you to consider some of the following questions. How do you see inclusive data impacting on your work? What considerations shared in these lightning discussions? And we've had lots of different reflections here, lots of different approaches. Which ones do you think are new to you? Which ones do you think you could incorporate in your work? And are there some priority areas or concerns in your work that are relevant in terms of building inclusive data practices? Right, we're going to test the technology now. So it's time to mute us here in.
Okay, so we have been muted, the online participants, but I don't know if the team in China can hear us. It looks like they can. So we need to just check the tech there. We'll have about 10 minutes for this conversation. For the online participants, you can put your hand up and my colleague Jessica will moderate the session, and Claudia will moderate the session in China. So
Wonderful. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yes?
yes, Jess, all good, all good.
Fantastic. Good, good. Great. It's a real pleasure to meet some of you. Just to introduce myself briefly, we want to focus this mostly on you and what you have taken away from this session and your reflections. But I am the CEO and founder of Aquila, which is a data analytics as a service platform focused on gender equality and social inclusion. I'm also a gender equality specialist. And really, I found this session really engaging and listening to all of the really different approaches that are being taken to inclusive data collection at the community level. For us, we found a challenge as we are trying to look at how we aggregate large amounts of data globally at the macro level for gender equality and social inclusion, but in a standardized way, and really found a lot of difficulty and gaps in finding inclusive and really intersectional data that we could look at in a really global way. We found a lot in terms of men versus women, girls versus boys, very binary gender data. There's actually quite a lot, but when we get down to things like disability or gender identity or different migration status, things like that, that was really standardized, it became really difficult for us. We're really committed to looking at solutions on how we can have that kind of standardized global view, but still honoring how different identities are in different communities. So with that, I'd love to open it up for all of you just to set expectations. Again, we're not going to learn everything in the next now 8 minutes, but we hope that you at least glean a new insight from a colleague or are able to take away a new connection to take forward collaboration. I did share in the chat a Padlet for those of you in the spirit of inclusive data collection, or at least inclusive sharing for those of you uncomfortable speaking. We encourage you to use the Padlet link to write down any thoughts that you have. Otherwise, please just raise your hand and come off mute. And I'll open it up with the first question, which is really, how do you see inclusive data impacting your work? And I'm also going to try to share the Padlet if it's possible. But how do you see the inclusive data impacting your work? Hopefully everyone can see this. And if you're new to Padlet, you can just add a comment and add something to the board there. I'm looking for any raised hands.
Hi, Jess. It's Emily from the ONS here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I haven't used this platform before, so I'm not entirely sure how it works. But so I thought I'd just, because I couldn't hear anyone else. And as to your first question, I was just going to say, I think at the ONS, inclusive data is something that we're trying to produce, but ultimately, I don't think that will ever end, because I think inclusivity is something that's going to evolve as, because it's all about people's various aspects of identity and other things like that. So that's not going to be a fixed point in time. So I don't think there's going to be a point that we can go, right, we are inclusive, full stop, tick, that's done. So I think
Right.
it's going to be something that grows, but maybe there are milestones to reach. And as you reach each one of them, it's more about, because we're a government organisation in the UK, it's about us providing the right data for the people of England and Wales and the rest of the UK. So it would be maybe about evidencing and seeing, better, we call them better data for better decisions, so that people are feeling the impact of data being more inclusive, and that they are included and that their concerns are represented. So yeah, I'd start there.
Yeah, I love that, and I love my takeaway when you said, we're never going to be able to say, okay, we're good, we're inclusive. It's going to be kind of an ongoing process is kind of really important, and how we all evolve and how our data collection needs to evolve with it. Does anyone have any reflections to that? I do see some people populating the Padlet, which is fantastic. I am happy to just call out a few things people are putting on the Padlet, but please come off if you have a response to what Emily just said or something to add. Yes, who's coming off mute? Someone's coming off mute. Does anyone have anything to respond about how you see inclusive data in your work?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm connected. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this is Charlene from Development Gateway. So at Development Gateway, we of course look at the intersection of technology and the use of digital and data to really push for more inclusive governments, and really just to make sure that all citizens' needs are met. And that's what I think Philip spoke about earlier around our procurement work. And with that, because procurement for us really focuses on how all citizens access government services. So if you think about health, all the most basic services are done through procurement. So I'll answer your question in two ways, where we inclusivity matters to us because we build digital tools. So as institution that also builds digital tools and data tools, we really have to be inclusive in how we design the digital tools for the use of all citizens. So we have to come up with engagement strategies to get feedback, to even come up with wireframes that we go back to citizens, private sector, governments to really understand what analytics or data really matters to them to push for that engagement. But as for many people on this call, of course, um, we want data to be open so that citizens and all stakeholders can engage with it, and then there's further engagement because data is not the end goal. So we are learning slowly as an institution that beyond our data, how can we really push for the uptake of this data by all the groups? So I'll give you an example of how in Kenya we have a policy for procurement for groups to access 30% of procurements, but they're not. How can procurement data push for inclusivity in the procurement process for people to also benefit from economically women and youth to really engage government from a business perspective but grow. So I think it's both in how we design our programs, but also the impact and the use of the data to push for also more inclusive outcomes.
That's fantastic. And I really liked how you emphasized the point of asking the people you are collecting data about what's actually important. What are the data collection points that matter? Because I think sometimes we don't always do that well. Thanks. And I see someone else who wrote that inclusive data is really the DNA of data that I think is really spot on. If anyone has anything else to add to this question, please feel free. I see other people adding to the two other questions on the Padlet. Yes, someone's coming off mute. Go ahead.
Hi, Jessica. It's Mike here. I'm also from the UK's Office for National Statistics, but I also work on the Inclusive Data Charter. And I think I've got 2 points to add. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that I think what is important to consider is that, and we've seen it in the Inclusive Data Charter network, is that sometimes it can be really small changes that make really big differences. And I think sometimes when we come to events like this, and we've had some really great speakers with some really nice examples, and obviously a whole lot of work and effort has gone into those kind of projects. And I think sometimes it can be important to kind of remember that actually sometimes really small incremental changes can have huge impacts on the marginalized communities that we're talking about here. And so that's kind of the first point I want to make, is that I think no step is too small in the right direction for inclusive data. Mm-hmm. I think the second thing I wanted to say is that I feel like we're also seeing a bit of a movement away from what we like traditionally think of as what falls in the bucket of inclusive data. Whether we might think of that solely as kind of inclusive data collection or inclusive data analysis. But I think we're moving away from just thinking about it in those areas, thinking about what does inclusion mean across the whole data value chain. And one aspect I want to pick up on for that, which has come out of the ONS's Inclusive Data Task Force, is how do we make ONS an inclusive institution, an inclusive organization, an inclusive place to work? Because that has knock-on effects for how inclusive our data is at the end of the day. The more kind of different variations of lived experience we can have in the building within our staff really has a knock-on impact on how we, develop surveys, how we do analysis, and how we engage with those kind of marginalized communities as a whole. So I think, there's some broader recognition around what inclusive data actually is and what it means to organizations, and how we can expand that away from simply thinking about collection or analysis of the data.
I love that. I love thinking about data in that value chain because it really isn't beyond, as you said, just collection and analysis, and how people are informing the whole strategy behind it. I think that's really critical. Thank you so much for adding that important insight. Anyone else wants to come off mute and also just talk about any priority areas, any concerns that you have? What are some risks or challenges, barriers? What do you think you want to be focusing on, or something that came out of this talk that is going to be a takeaway in how you do your work differently? And I like some other people, someone mentioned in terms of a challenge, how do we firstly identify marginalized groups, particularly through invisible in existing data set? So we don't know what we don't know. And also, how do we plan engagement with them? I think that's a really relevant question. I don't know if anyone wants to come off mute who wrote that question, but that almost is speaking a little bit to what Michael currently said in terms of needing to think about how do you figure out the answer to this question. And I think that's a little bit about what another speaker had mentioned about, really consulting with people who you want to discover and learn about, and having them part of that process too, to say, we'll tell you what it is that you need to know that you might not know yet. Does anyone have a reaction to this challenge that someone raised?
I'm happy to jump in here, Jessica, and stuff. And yeah, building off that comment, hi everyone. I'm Philip Davidovich, one of the speakers, but that comment obviously from Mike, and then obviously in the Padlet resonate with me, essentially like moving beyond the kind of collection and analysis phase in inclusive data, where we're essentially like I do feel like we're at that space where the lack of action or a lack of follow through with inclusive data is kind of flat or kind of doesn't have much kind of direction behind it. And I think that is kind of a metric of maturity that we've been seeing in the sector widely. So yeah, I think from our experience and our work with Development Gateway and Charlene and stuff, having those kind of feedback loops for very accessible spaces, obviously like procurement and also services that we've also done, have been really great entry points. But I think it's also a space where we're constantly questioning what are the other types of entry points, right? In our purview services or where we work, but what are the other types of actions and considerations, power dynamics associated with the processes that we're dealing with that need to be considered? Because obviously we are in our own way are just part of a lot of the life cycles that the other organizations might be working within. So I think that definitely resonated in seeing the larger picture of how your inclusive data sets and actions are trying to have a meaningful impact. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any reflections on that they would like to share, considerations on how you want to incorporate any of the discussions, any of the points that people have made into your work, other areas of concern that we haven't talked about yet? I see quite a few comments actually about this point, about really looking more comprehensively about the whole data value chain and going beyond the inclusive data collection process. So that seems to be something that many people are grabbing onto. Let's see, I'm just looking at the Padlet. Anything else?
Jessica, if you can allow me to come in and state, I do agree with the sentiments which have been expressed, and perhaps because different countries at different levels is perhaps to start where one is. And I think in Kenya, we've walked baby steps since 2018. We are not where we would want to be, but hopefully that will get there, and we are seeing more support from actors, and also trying to see where can we plug in, even just in terms of collection and analysis, even as we build the wider traction of that. Those are not the only two components that we should be focusing on.
I love that. I think someone else had talked too about how it's important to just make small incremental changes. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of the way you're doing something, but that those small incremental changes that you're doing can have a big impact when we're talking about moving toward more inclusive data. So that's great to hear, something that you're also practicing and seeing as something that's useful. Great. Any other points that people want to raise as they come off mute? Oh, it looks like we should be wrapping. Sorry, I got the message now that we should be wrapping up. For those facilitating, I think, is there anyone technologically facilitating? Are we going to rejoin the big group now to synthesize what we've learned together?
Yes, I'm the tech person, and I know we have the World Data Forum host also here. So just to let them know that we are ready to move to close the discussions and have the China team join us.
Okay, great. Yeah, so these are, I think, all excellent points, and hopefully after this concludes, you will all be using the Whova app to connect and continue some of this conversation about inclusive data, and perhaps there's some areas of continued learning and collaboration. So looking forward to rejoining the others that are in the room, and we can all synthesize and learn what the other group talked about as well. Although in the meantime, I think as soon as they cut us off, we can be cut off, but feel free to we can continue the conversation until we move over there. Oh, it looks like we're moving over, perhaps.
I'm not sure how it works, Jessica, so we could just carry on talking until we see the screen of the guys in China. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, does anyone have any other points? I saw other thing on the Padlet I see is about the importance of people, partnerships, and processes and collaborations. And I think one thing that I'm hearing or reflecting on is we have these different different people who are involved who are speaking today and talking about their own experiences. Everyone from people who are kind of at the community level and really working with people that they are learning about and providing services to people who are babysitting in different countries and trying to support this data process. And having that strong connection and that partnership, I think is really important between academic institutions, between people who are funding data collection processes, and then those on the ground. And it'd be great to hear if any of you have any lessons learned on kind of what makes a great partnership for inclusive data when we're talking about kind of local data collection, but being done in a very international way at scale, and how you kind of good practices you've seen in maintaining that integrity in the data, the entire inclusive data chain collection analysis, strategic framework for everything. What do you see as good partnership best practices?
Not to
Anyone have any?
share one example from IREX's experience. One of our programs, this wasn't highlighted in our presentation, but one of our programs it's called Youth Excel, with USAID, actually kind of pitched the idea of uh, approaching that partnership, that donor implementer relationship with an understanding of kind of mutual learning, because a big component of that program is a consortium of local partners. So they in a lot of ways, they work directly with the partners that work with the participants, and so having that kind of horizontal relationship was really essential. And it wasn't easy, and I think I'd be fascinated to hear other folks' experiences with like building that rapport with the donor, to have that kind of clear awareness of how you can be as an implementer more essentially horizontal with the subgrantees or the other kind of partners that you bring into the process, because it's easier said than done, right? I think all of us in that kind of relationship, there is that kind of implicit power dynamic and in what donors expect and want from the funding. But then when like rubber hits the road and you get into the local context, is allowing local partners to have the freedom and the autonomy to make the decisions that are best suited for their expertise, honestly. So I think that's something that program Youth Excel has really um, done a great job in facilitating with the donor. And I'd love to hear if anyone else had any experiences with that type of process with their donors or other local partners in supporting that process. Because yeah, obviously the session's all about partnerships, and that definitely stood out to me as well.
Yeah. Anything someone wants to add?
I think the China group is now done, so Claudia is just going to take back the mic and we'll join them. But yeah, I encourage us to continue using the Padlet.
Okay, great.
Karen, we've overrun a little bit, but are you there and able to potentially report back from your breakout group online?
Yes, we are here and done. So Jessica will report back on the discussions we had in the online group.
Great. Do you want me to start off now?
Wonderful.
Are we all merged?
Karen, could you possibly open the camera as well, please?
Yeah. Is it okay if I start?
Yeah, go ahead and start and start talking, and we'll see if we can get you up on the screen here. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. I'm not sure if you can see the Padlet that we used or not, but we had a great discussion. We used Padlet to capture some of the sentiments that people were sharing. We found that some of the key threads that many people were talking about is really about how there's been a shift from talking about inclusive data as kind of how we collect inclusive data or what inclusive data is, and how we analyze it, to really thinking about it in a much more holistic way in sort of this data value chain, and how we're making sure we're inclusive in our organizations that are making decisions about what type of data we're going to collect and how we're going to collect it and who we're partnering with, and how people are inputting into what they think data should be collected about them. So someone had raised, for example, how do we really identify in the first place marginalized groups who might be invisible, and kind of figure out, right now we don't know what we don't know, and then how we figure out what we should actually be collecting. So really that importance of talking about inclusive data and that entire value chain or ecosystem of data. So that was something that came up quite frequently. And then also the importance of partnerships. We kind of ended talking a little bit more about how important it is to have kind of figure out sometimes the tensions. I mean, there's opportunities, but also the tensions between kind of what a donor might want, and standardization versus kind of making sure that we're allowing local partners to make decisions and kind of stay true to an inclusive data collection process. That's important. And kind of the topic of power dynamics came up quite a few in quite a few instances. That's something that is really important to think about: who's setting the agenda, who's setting the priorities, who's also influencing the data collection tools and inputting into not just what data is collected or how it's collected, but the actual tools and mechanisms by which data is collected and who's collecting it. So that was kind of the main takeaways that I found, is really kind of how we're thinking comprehensively about what inclusive data means beyond the data itself. And I'll end there and hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And we did have a little snapshot of your tableau there. So thank you so much. It's fascinating. And there was a lot of similarity with our group, in particular that tension between partnerships and the need to build our skills and our ways of working, I think, for partnerships. Perhaps that's something about the values and the way we work together, and coming to a partnership with similar principles and values will help. We did also have a discussion around the importance of understanding collection. Who is the person reporting back? Because actually that person, is it the head of the household? Yeah, are we really getting to the individual and really needing to understand the on the ground mechanics of how data is collected, because that really has an impact on your result and how you analyze it. We talked quite a lot about communication, actually, real communication, really listening to each other, and the need to do that a lot, but also the need to think about the NSO in this process, how we scale it, how we think about the standardization of it, and how difficult sometimes it is from an NSO perspective to coordinate this and integrate the different sources, so to work together to provide that. But a note to end on, which was the need for leadership across this space to integrate this from the very beginning. It's not just a nice to have, we've got to kind of mainstream inclusion across everything we do, and for that we need leadership. And I would say that you all in the room here physically in Hangzhou and virtually online are the leaders. So can I please ask you all to do what I did with my group, which was ask you all to exchange details with each other, because your partnerships with each other will be the new partnerships for tomorrow. We can show everyone else how it's done, and ensure that our data becomes more inclusive and ensure that we leave no one behind. So just a quick thank you to my organisers, Karen from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Phil from IREX, who kind of organised this event and brought us together, and a very big thank you to our technical team, who we've really tested today, and the lovely people who organise this in the room here, and the people who were facilitating the online group. Thank you very much. Please do exchange all of your details, and we'll be talking more on inclusion, I'm sure, as we conclude the World Data Forum tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.